International Affairs analyst, also Dr. Francis Mading Deng, who is an ambassador at large. Gentlemen, I'll just pick it up from where John left. And Ambassador, this is to you. He said that it's unacceptable that we have leaders, South Sudanese leaders in Kenya, having haircuts. Well, citizens are actually suffering in the country. Your response?
You know, I have to say that I entirely agree with what John has said. And the irony is, I think even the leaders of South Sudan would agree with him. I heard President Salva Kiir say to his ruling party publicly, he said, when we became independent, we were a proud nation with our head high. Now we are no longer. Our heads are lowered because of what we have done to our people. Mm-hmm. Why? Why have we done that to our people? This is the president saying it. And I went to him and said, I like what you said, and I'm going to use it in my international relations. Now, one of the things that used to be very painful to me when I was in the international system is when leaders say they care more about our people than our own leaders. This is international leaders saying, we care more about your people than you yourselves do. It's very painful. So my argument is we have to assume that leaders have good intentions for their people. So what is wrong? What has gone wrong? My argument is that the leadership from the international community that is helping us is also part of the problem. They bring these two people, Riek Machar and Salva Kiir, to try to iron things out so that they share power. The focus is on power and these people sharing power. Nobody is thinking about the nation where violence is rampant everywhere. People are killing one another, intercommunal violence. People have been displaced. People are not growing their own food. 70% of people of South Sudan depending on international food aid. Why? A country that is so rich potentially with abundant land, who used to cultivate. So I go back to say the peace talks has been really what you might call war talk, not genuine peace talk among people who have a common vision for their country. What I like, and I very much appreciate your addressing the question of the region and the leaders of Africa, we need to be aware of the fact that we have a common ground. We have a common goal. We sit together and say, what has gone wrong? Who has done what? And this is not just South Sudanese among themselves. It's also the international community contributing to the internal problems. If we sit with the assumption that we all have good intentions for our people, that as Salva Kiir said, why are we doing this to our people? And if we say, Kiir, Riek Machar too, we have to assume wants good for his people. So why don't we sit with our African leaders, peers, who would talk to them and say, brothers, your problems are not just your problems. They are African problems. We are all in this together. Let us see what has gone wrong and discuss from each point of view, what are your concerns? And see what genuine concerns can be addressed. Rights and wrongs are never on one side. And if people go to war, it's because there's a reason. And I do believe that the problems that we were fighting in the Sudan against marginalization, discrimination, exclusion by the Arabs, these issues are still there in South Sudan. There are people who feel marginalized, discriminated, excluded. Mm-hmm. We have to sit and think about the country as a whole, not about the two parties and fighting over. If you are in war and you are fighting, you don't think what is happening to my family back there. You talk about what is happening to the enemy in front of you. This is the way leaders are talking. They're talking politics that are politics of war, not people who have genuine concern about the nation and thinking about to solve the problem of the nation, not only in Juba. We are centralizing the problem at all levels, going down to the local level. Let people go back to their villages. Give them security. Let them cultivate. Let them feed themselves. It's a nation of proud people being impoverished and being turned into beggars, depending on international aid.
All right, so then, Ambassador, what options does South Sudan have, considering, you're an ambassador, you're on the ground, you have access to these leaders. Have these conversations been taking place?
First of all, UNMISS is there, originally intended to bring comprehensive solutions to all the problems of the country. Then came war, and they reduced their role to one of humanitarianism, responding to humanitarian assistance. Most of the countries that were actually helping South Sudan deal with the problems of building the state and building the nation are simply now dealing with feeding people, giving humanitarian assistance. Gradually, they are coming back to addressing issues of capacity building and building the nation. My idea is that the problems of South Sudan can be addressed if African leaders and international community come and sit with our leaders together and have what we would then call hard talk, friendship talk. People who, because we trust one another, we can talk candidly about what has gone wrong. And I think if we do that, we turn what is a fight in negotiations into cooperation in finding solutions in the country, which we have to assume leaders want to do for their people.
All right, John, coming to you, do you think they need external forces, or this is something they can actually just resolve it on their own if they want to?
I think, as the ambassador is saying, I think they would need, of course, external support and external engagement. And for our own interests, say Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, Sudan, and what have you, if there is an unstable South Sudan, the impact of that is felt within Kenya, within Uganda, and of course within South Sudan itself, Ethiopia, and what have you. So there is no way that South Sudan's problem can be tackled without the engagement and involvement of the region. The bigger question is at what level and at what cost, and indeed if any of the parties to the negotiation in South Sudan were to disengage, what sanctions do they face? Political, economic, social, and what have you. I think perhaps the East African community, perhaps the IGAD, perhaps the African Union, and indeed the United Nations, plus the Troika, they needed to revise, review their engagement with this leadership. But it cannot be left to the South Sudanese leaders alone, because they need to be pushed along. It must be made painful to them.
Okay.
For me, it is to make it painful for the political leadership in South Sudan not to engage in what they have done over the last 10 years, to engage in what I would call rotary, where the people of South Sudan have shared an untold suffering, which they really don't deserve. Can Africa, the United Nations, the regional countries, can they bring enough political, diplomatic, and economic and personal pressure and accountability on the table?
Okay, Ambassador, coming to you even as we wind up, of course we have noted that there is no goodwill, political goodwill, but to the citizens who are supposed to celebrate 10 years of independence tomorrow, which according to the United Nations data, the number of people there in need of support grew to 8.5 million in 2021. That is roughly 2/3 of the country's entire population. What do they have to celebrate? What can they be told? So then what? Do they have to wait?
Well, I should say that, in crisis there are opportunities, and crises really are a wake-up cry for the country to look at itself. I do believe, by the way, that South Sudan for the last 3.5, 4 years, they have been talking about their problems. I was involved in the national dialogue, which involved people at all levels throughout the country, holding consultations to discuss what went wrong and how can we solve that. While the people at the top were discussing power sharing and security arrangements, people at the bottom, at the level of the state and down to the local level, were talking comprehensively, dealing with all aspects of the problems. We now need to bring these two forces together. Power sharing, with all its faults, is there, and the international community is involved. Let us agree to move beyond centralized discussion of the problem, to go to the state level, to the country level, bring security to the countryside, so that people can at least go back to their areas from being displaced. Give them basic to begin to have self-sustaining productivity in agriculture. So I would say that South Sudan is there, has a future. Yes, we have crises. These crises are hopefully waking us up. Even the leadership is being challenged. Let us sit together as Africans, as international partners. How can we work together?